first and foremost, before we get to the poll question, I just want your 2 cents on the signing of Daniel Sprong. It is our top story today, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. Your shout first. I'll go next.
I think it's a good depth move for the Vancouver Canucks. I think he's a guy that, people look at him and say that his many teams and his many seasons, what's the catch for him? But he's a guy that can put up points. And the Canucks, they think that they can work with them, right? If it's a project, maybe it's something that Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff want to go out and be able to try and solve here. But I think that there's a bigger picture here when you look at it. Like, he's a guy that can play up and down the lineup, but he's a guy now that gives them some flexibility if they want to package younger guys for what I believe is a need, and that's a defenseman. That's what I think is going to happen at some point here, whether it's over the summer or as we get into the season. But I think this is part of a much bigger picture. It's great signing for the Canucks. It's good if he can put up 30, 40 points, but I think there's something more to this.
So you think Höglander now is the key piece in getting that top 4 right shot defenseman?
Well, I think it's going to take more than just him.
Okay.
I think that, it could be a package of young guys. Maybe he's not the guy. Maybe it's another group of players that they want to go and do. But getting Daniel Sprong allows them to go and do that. Now you have another guy. Now you have someone else that you can play that's NHL ready, that can play in every single day in different situations in the game. And they didn't have the luxury of having that before.
He's a shooter. He's a scorer. He's a finisher. 39 goals over his last 2 seasons. He can play with skill in the top 6. He's a right shot. And, of course, they don't have a lot of those up front, Irf, just Garland and Besser amongst their offensive players. He's a different profile of a bottom 6 player. Who knows? He could be a specialist here. He's not exactly hard on pucks. He's not good defensively. He's not exactly your wall warrior. Now, Rick Tocchet in this Pittsburgh regime, or ex-Pittsburgh regime, does know him. Drafted him back when they were with the Penguins. So may have to coach him up here. He may have to adapt his game. And you mentioned the lack of league-wide respect for this player. It is interesting, Irf, that he has bounced around so often. Drafted by the Penguins, and he was a guy who was tracking as a first-round pick, didn't make it there, got to the second round in the 2015 entry draft. Then he was on his way to Anaheim in 2018, then Washington in 2020, then the Seattle Kraken through their expansion era, and then last year with the Detroit Red Wings. So it has been, the Canucks are 6th team now.
Yeah.
And his 6th team since 2018. It's a lot of bouncing around. More on that in a second. First, let me tell you about Yellow Dog. Yellow Dog has dropped another 10th anniversary beer, Pool Party Peach IPA. It's a brew that is a splashy collab with their good friends from Twin Sails Brewing and Fieldhouse Brewing. It's a fruited IPA, clean, crisp, bursting with peachy goodness. Hint of apricot. Grab a 4-pack. Keep it poolside for all your summer festivities. Why has he bounced around so much? What do you hear when you ask that question?
It's weird because, look, he 43 points last season, 46 with the Kraken. He's a 20-goal scorer in the National Hockey League. I mean, some of it might be fit. To be completely honest, there could be other determining factors that surround the player and the thing. And maybe it takes time for a guy to find home. You don't find home until you get to a certain age in your life, but he's still a young player, right? I mean, he's 27 years old, right? He turns 28 next season for the Vancouver, when he will be a member of the Vancouver Canucks. But yeah, it's an interesting one, Matt. I mean, you look at this player that he's definitely can score. He definitely can help teams down the lineup as well and play that other area of the game. I think it's the defensive woes that might hurt him a little bit, but if you're the Vancouver Canucks and you need a guy that, can put the puck in the net, he's consistently proven that over the last 2 seasons he can go and do it. It kind of shores up your second unit power play, really, in a sense with having him on it. And like I said off the top, I think that he's a guy that's going to come in here and he's going to work. And I think that, he's a Rick Tocchet type of guy where Tocchet thinks and believes, and so does Patrick Alvino, obviously, or they wouldn't have signed him, that they can work with them and get him to a point where, he might be going to look for a big contract next season, and it might just be more than a shade under $1 million. So this one's going to be interesting to see how how we follow it and who he plays with. I think that's the biggest one, right? Is he going to be in the bottom 6-4 group, or is he going to find his way into that top 6?
More on that in a second here. Noah Strang of the Daily Hive did some digging. 11th amongst all players in 5-on-5 goals per 60 over the past 2 years. And he's ahead of guys like Zach Hyman, Arturi Panarin, Mikko Rantanen in that category. As Noah notes, he scores even strength goals at an incredible rate, and the Canucks need wingers who can score. And of course, Nils Höglander is high up these lists as well, Irf, because he doesn't get a lot of power play time either, and yet is a productive goal scorer. Look, as for the poll question, should the Canucks trade Höglander now for a top 4 defenseman? If you can find a top 4 right shot defenseman for Nils Höglander, as Irf says, it's probably going to take more. Then you do that deal all day. That is the harder profile of player to get. As much as you may love Nils Höglander, as much as you may still have some concerns about the Canucks on the wing, or at least firepower on the wing, I still think you make that move. I wouldn't go into that lightly. Höglander is cheap this year, playing on $1.1 million. I mean, if he gets you another 20, 25 goals, that is exceptional value, given what you're paying the player. Secondly, he's club controlled for 3 more years after this one. Mm-hmm. So you have him here over the next 4 years. Now, he may well get expensive, Irf, after this year. Like if he gets another 23, 25 goals, he's either got the option to take you to arbitration, or you're going to have to pay him more money. So next summer would be a summer where I think Nils Höglander could cash in a little bit. You'd have to tell me what else it would take to get that top 4 defenseman. What I do know, and Puckpedia is all over this, after signing Sprong, the Canucks, and it's a $975,000 contract, the Canucks projected $16,000, narrowly under the cap, with a full roster of 23 active players. This assumes Oman in the minors, Di Giuseppe on the roster to be compliant, Pullman on LTIR, and then you're able to exceed the cap. So we talked on Friday, actually, with Blake and Jeff. Are they done? And if they're not done, what are the options? And one of the options we talked about is go out and sign a bottom 6 forward who gets you a little closer to the salary cap limit, or salary cap, which allows you to further use that Tucker Pullman LTIR bonus overage. They've gone and done just that. All right. Jay Fresh Hockey, Daniel Sprong, an efficient scoring winger who creates scoring chances and goals at extremely high rates and depth minutes, but never seems to gain the trust of his coaches to move up the lineup. Somebody asked Jay Fresh, well, why do you think that is? He says, I think coaches prefer their 4th line to be a safety valve. They can confidently just send out there to muck around, as opposed to being a high maintenance scoring line whose deployment they need to manage. How do you see that playing out with Rick Tocchet? Do you think Rick Tocchet is a guy who's going to put skill with skill and not want to mess around with a safety valve 4th line? Could you see him starting a little lower in the lineup? It's the poll question we asked on Saturday. Upon this signing, what line does he play on, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th? How do you see it?
I mean, there's a chance of him going in the top 6, right? If Höglander's not up to par, or we've noticed that, Höglander's benched in the playoffs, and that's not trusting by the coach. That's exactly what that is. I mean, Heinen, Miller, Besser, is that your top line? And then are you going to do things with DeBrusk and Pettersson, and maybe put Daniel Sprong up there to see if he can make something work? I mean, your 3rd line, probably Joshua, Bluger, Garland. I think that's Rick Tocchet's safety valve right there. Mm-hmm. That is that line. The 4th line's the interesting one, right? Is it going to be PDG? Is it going to be Podkolzin? Is it going to be Pius Suter? Is it going to be Kiefer Sherwood, right? Is it going to be one of those guys? Obviously, Sherwood's going to be there. Suter's going to be there. But who's that extra guy? So that's where the Sprong thing is interesting to me. is he going to be up in the lineup because he can score, he can put up points with good players, or is he going to be a guy that you play lower in the lineup and just hope that you can go out when it's known that he really can't be trusted by coaches?
What I love is this creates further competition at training camp. It's going to let players know that nothing is being guaranteed to them. And specifically, when I say players, I mean Vasily Podkolzin. I think a lot of different ways the Canucks were cutting up their 12 forwards, watching fans do it, watching media do it. Podkolzin was there as a fourth liner.
Yep.
Is he still there amongst your 12th forwards, Irf? What do you think?
I don't know. I really don't. I think it's a big summer for him. I think that, we'll obviously talk to Patrick Johnson a little bit later, but I think that, look, he had 2 assists in 19 games. Like, you got to do more. I know in the American League, he was putting up some numbers and playing up the lineup, but you have to create your own opportunity. You have to outdo your competition. If you're Vasily Podkolzin, you got to come into camp and, it's great to run around and hit people. It really is. But your job is to put the puck in the net, right? And I think for the Vancouver Canucks, in that top 6 forward group, there's going to be a lot of competition. You sign a guy like Jake DeBrusk, give him all that money. You sign a guy like Danton Heinen, and you give him all that money. And now you have your Pedersens, you have your Millers, you have your Bessers. In all reality, there's one spot there in that top 6 forward group. Who's it going to be? Sprong, Podkolzin, Höglander, or someone else?
Yeah. It's funny because I could see him starting off as a specialist, a power play guy, a spot play guy, and deployment on the fourth line when Tocchet feels comfortable with that. I could also see him starting up the lineup, as you note, and pushing one of those other guys down. And let's face it, the profile of those other guys might be a little bit more inclined to bottom 6 duty than top 6 duty. Not talking about DeBrusk here, but someone like a Heinen.
Yep.
Answer me this: second year in a row where they have signed a forward, and a forward with a pretty nifty track record, and one that drew praise from a lot of circles, and another forward who's analytically inclined. The analytics folks like him. Of course, it was Pius Suter last year in August. Now, you say Bluger, Garland, and Joshua. Is there any chance that Suter centers that line this year? That Bluger is your fourth line center because of the lack of finish he showed last year, when oftentimes he had opportunities with those two guys and the puck wasn't going in the back of the net?
No, absolutely. I just think that that's a line that is in his back pocket. It's in his safety. It's where Rick Tocchet knows he can go to if things aren't going well, and you need to combine that, have that line together. I mean, Suter could be with Miller again because they had so much chemistry late in the season, and that was their top line. So it's a good problem to have. I think if you're a Canuck fan and you're watching this and you're looking at it, here in the middle of summer being like, oh, what are these lines? Let's see what we can come up with. If you have competition and you have names and you're trying to plug guys in, that's a good thing. Because before, you'd look at it and be like, oh, man, is Neil Zaman going to be our guy on the fourth line? No disrespect to Neil Zaman, but you need to have more. And for the Vancouver Canucks, they finally have that. They have that luxury. Rick Tocchet and his staff are probably thrilled by it, where there is going to be a lot of internal competition, not only for your 1 spot or 2 spots in the top 6-4 group, but to actually finish and shore your entire roster.
As JPAT noted on the weekend, I like the fact that guys like Sprong and Sherwood have discernible skills in fourth line roles. Too much. What exactly do you do around here on the fourth line last season?
Sam Lafferty.
Yeah.
Right? For so long.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's obviously gone to...
Well, Podkolzin too. Like, it was like,
exactly.
okay, you hit people, but what else do you do? Is there anything else you can do? And he got his opportunity. Sprong over the last couple of seasons has outscored Nils Höglander, Dakota Joshua, Ilya Mikheyev, Pius Suter, and Teddy Bluger. And I think there's also a school of thought you've got to consider here if you're Rick Tocchet and the coaching staff, that if we don't put Sprong with skill, are we getting the best out of him? There are certain guys who can play with different profiles of players and still be effective, but is Sprong one of those guys still, or do you have to play him with skill to get the most out of him? Hey, the salary is entirely variable in the minors. So if worse came to worse and they wanted to send him down to Abbotsford, of course, he would have to clear waivers, as does Vasily Podkolzin now. Nils Oman. In fact, I think the only guy that the Canucks are going to carry this season who doesn't require waivers will be Artur Shilovs. So, yeah, worst comes to worst. There is no stink on the salary cap. You can bury the salary in its entirety in the minors. Said last year, beginning of this year, every summer we say this. I'm for every 1-year contract with a salary that you can bury entirely in the minors. Had a ton of positive feedback on this signing from Canucks fans on social media over the course of the weekend. In fact, we asked, what line does Sprong most likely play on? Fourth line won the vote there, got 34%, but really spaced out voting here. 28% said the third line, 29% said the second line, even 8% said the first line. So we'll find a fit for him in training camp. Wouldn't be surprised to see him get opportunity, much like I wouldn't be surprised to see Höglander and Podkolzin get opportunity as well. You know, big show me years for both of those players. In Höglander's case, it's beyond the goal scoring. In Podkolzin's case, it is very much about chipping in and contributing some offense. And with regards to Canucks Nation, loving this signing, Blake on the weekend. Imagine getting in the time machine and telling Vancouver fans 4 years ago that Canucks Twitter is now tired of the phrase tidy piece of business.
It's true.
It's true. It's become a cliche now with Patrick Allvin. Everything is a tidy piece of business. So we'll see where Sprong works out. But at this stage in the summer, for what he cost you and what his track record is, this is, dare I say it, a tidy signing. The other thing on Höglander, and James is on Twitter asking the question, Irf.
Okay.
Would you be selling high here? Do you want to protect the asset? Because here's the thing. If he takes a step back, heading towards RFA with Arbrights, suddenly the asset's going to lose a lot of value, right? Right now, he's a 23-goal guy on $1.1 million, who is still young, who is still club-controlled, and who fits tidily into your salary cap. He'll be 24 in December. He fits tidily into your salary cap scenario. Those things may not necessarily be the case at the end of the season with Nils Höglander. So do you think like this is a sell high, he will never have more value than right now scenario with Höglander?
I don't know. I thought that at some point during the season last year, yeah, for sure. I thought that if they wanted to make a move at the deadline and try and do something that, you know, he might be a piece that they were willing to part with. But, you know, you go to Daily Faceoff right now and just look at their projected depth chart and lines. Like Nils Höglander is the top line left winger beside JT Miller and beside Brock Besser. Does he need to prove that he deserves to play in that spot? Absolutely. I think Rick Tocchet has been very clear of that when talking about his players. But then you just go down quickly. You scroll down a little bit. You look at the defensemen. Other than Hughes and Roenick, yeah, Tyler Myers had an incredible season last year. Yes, he came back and played some of his best hockey. But that's your fourth defenseman. That's your next right shot defenseman after Philip Roenick. And then below Tyler Myers is Vincent Desharnais. There are more people or more players in this lineup that you can move up to play in the top of the lineup than defensemen you can move up. So I think for the Canucks, you really have to look at it and say, are we willing to part ways, to answer your question, with an asset to try and get someone to play in behind Philip Roenick, to play instead of Tyler Myers? What if Vincent Desharnais gets hurt? Derek Forbort, yes, that's a good signing as well, but that bottom pairing of Derek Forbort and Vinny Desharnais could be a disaster at some points. We haven't seen them play together, but on some games it might not be good. So if I'm the Canucks, I really do try and improve that blue line if I can.
Yeah, and there's still names out there. Yep. You would think if they had interest in Tyson Barrie, Victoria's Tyson Barrie, that might already have come to pass. He's a right shot, of course. And
I got a name.
yeah.
Victor Soderstrom.
Oh, wow.
The Arizona Coyotes moved up to pick him at the draft here in Vancouver, Matt.
That's right.
Yeah, 2019. They picked him at 11th overall, 23-year-old right shot defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for, I think, a new home. I now, whatever the Arizona Utah organization wants or what it's going to take to try and make that work remains to be seen. But that's a name that I would keep an eye on and I'd be interested in.
The 11th overall pick,
Yeah.
a Swedish, undersized Swedish right side defenseman, parts of 4 seasons with the Arizona Coyotes, has played 53 National Hockey League games, amassed just 11 points. He was very much viewed as one of these puck-moving power play quarterback style of defensemen
Arizona
coming out of the juniors. Yeah.
They traded up to get him.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think is there much asset value there left with the 23-year-old? Or
I think so. I think that there's definitely
so
an indication where he wants to play. I think it's going to cost you a little bit. It might not be Höglander. It could be something else.
Yeah.
Right. Could be a different package of younger players. Maybe Höglander isn't the guy.
That'd be a hell of a gamble to move Höglander for a guy who, let's face it, has failed to launch.
Yeah, but maybe not. Maybe it's not Höglander, but I think that's a name to maybe keep an eye on here as we head towards the middle of the summer.
Point totals are okay at the American Hockey League level. I mean, it's about a half point per game over his AHL career, but massive dashes as well.
Yeah, no.
In the AHL, I mean, it's imperfect stat. I think everybody will acknowledge that. But, this kid is he's minus 47 in AHL play over his career. So, anyways, interesting name. Very interesting name. So, Daniel Sprong, a Vancouver Canuck, where he fits in the lineup and what that means for Nils Höglander, Vasily Podkolzin, or some of the other wingers. Now, big questions that we'll start getting answers to in training camp.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.